Did you know not every comic has to be graded? In fact, some comics go for the same price, if not more, when they are raw/ungraded. So a lot of times it'll depend on the grade of the comic book, but here are some keys that you might not realize they don't need to be graded. Let's take New Mutants number 98, first appearance of Deadpool. Now, not every grade range needs to be graded. For example, I think anything sub a 9.0 probably doesn't need to be graded if you don't want it to be. In fact, from a 9.0 all the way down to even like a 6.5, they're about the same price if you have it graded by CGC, roughly anywhere from $225 to $275. But in fact, you could probably sell it raw for the same price, if not more. Here's an example of one selling for $365 in a 9.0. Or how about X-Men 266, first appearance of Gambit? Now, I would say something below like a sub 9.4 probably don't really need to get it graded. They range from anywhere from about $125 to $175 if they're graded by CGC, but you can actually sell one. Here's an example selling one for about $200 raw, ungraded. And you can also do more expensive books, such as a Marvel Spotlight number 5, first appearance of Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider. Now, I would say anything sub 6.5 probably don't have to get it graded. They go for anywhere $600 to $900, graded down from a 6.5 all the way down to, even like a 3.5. And here's an example of one selling for like $900. So again, you don't have to get graded. Now, I've done many videos at length of the positives to getting things graded. It's easier to turn around and sell. You don't have to worry about if it's restored, missing a page, or anything like that. Also protects its not only just its value, but also protects physically the comic book from damages throughout the years. Also, there's Hulk number 340, great cover by Todd McFarlane. I would say anything probably sub 8.5. If you don't want to, you don't have to get it graded because they sell for anywhere from about $150 to $190. And here's an example of 6.5 selling for about $190 raw, completely ungraded. Marvel Superhero Secret Wars number 8. I would say anything a sub 9.4 probably don't need to get graded. Even sometimes it can go for more ungraded. This one is going to range anywhere from a 7.0, roughly about $150, all the way up to a 9.4, going about $225. And here's an example where it sold for more raw ungraded. This person called it a near mint. That's a 9.4, and it sold for $300. Wolverine number 1 limited, I would say probably somewhere around an 8.0, sub 8.0 is fine to not having to get it graded. They sell for anywhere about $60 to $80 if they're graded, but if you have it raw, you can easily get $60 for it. And then Spider-Man 300, first appearance of Venom. I would say sub 7.5. It's going to run you about $275 to maybe $325. Just look at these prices. A 7.5 is averaging about $280. A 7.0 is about $277. A 6.5 is $315. A 6.0 is $265. A 5.0 is $300. They all average around the same. But in a raw, here's one selling for about $400 in a 7.5. That's what this person claims it to be. Spawn number 1, 9.6 and below. You don't have to get it graded because they sell anywhere from about $50, $60. And you could probably get that in the raw grade, no problem. Now, one of the reasons you have to think about, it's like, why shouldn't I get this graded, is because it costs money to get it graded. Now, if you already bought it graded, that's one thing. But if you have it in your possession and you're thinking, wow, I really need to get the value out of this and it's not going to sell for that much, you have to think about, what is it going to cost you to get that comic book graded? Well, you have to pay for shipping there and back to CGC or PSA or wherever you send it. And then you have to pay for them to grade it. And let's hope that it comes back the grade that you're hoping it gets. And then that could cost you, the whole process could cost you $40, $50. Now, what if you have them press and clean it? Now you're adding, even more money on top of way more time to have it done. And maybe in the end, it's not really worth it because these books can get the same price or close to it, totally ungraded, just raw. Another example is Ultimate Fallout 4. This is a pretty hot book. So I would say anything sub 9.0, you're looking about $190 to $240, and you could easily get that. Here's an example of $250. You can even go some Bronze Age stuff such as Commandy number 1. Now I'd say a sub 9.2 is going to get you about $40 to $80 somewhere in there, and you could easily probably get yourself $50 raw for that book. Or you can get X-Men number 1, the collector's edition from the 90s X-Men, the good X-Men, and I would say anything from a 9.6 and below. You don't have to get it graded. because you could easily get about $40 to $50 if it's graded. But again, you could probably get $50 as well if it was raw and ungraded. Or how about Hulk 182? You know, anything probably sub 7.5 for this book is going to run you, 140, 180 depending on the grade range. But you could easily probably get 140, probably on the lower end of that, no problem if it is raw. Or how about Batman 423? I would say anything sub 8.5 is probably going to range anywhere from like $150, $170, and you can easily get that, if not more, raw. Now, why am I giving like certain grade ranges? Like, why not go all the way up to 9.8 in this book, or 9.6? Well, at some point, there's a breakaway from the raw grade and price that you can get versus the graded by CGC or PSA grade versus the price you can get. And there's a breakaway point. At some point, it makes more sense to get it graded. Like this book as an example, in a 9.8, this is going to run you over $1,000. Now, if you try to sell this raw as a 9.8, you're not going to get anywhere close to that. So it's definitely better to get it graded. So there's a certain point where it becomes worth it to get it graded. At a 9.6, it's still worth it to get it graded. 9.4, still worth it. The amount of money you're going to spend to send it off to these grading companies to get it graded is definitely worth the investment. But again, that's not always the case. So at some point, and that's where I figure, somewhere around sub 8.5, maybe a 9.0 is okay, but really about sub 8.5, that's when you're getting to where you factor in everything, your time cost, your actual cost to get it graded, all this thing. It's like, is it really worth it? I don't really know. It does make it a little easier to sell when it is graded because the buyer will obviously know what grade it actually is and won't have to take a chance and trust your grading. So there's that to factor in. But again, when it comes to prices, some of these keys are just as good raw. Detective 880, this is going to be a sub 9.4, probably 150 to 190, and you could probably easily get 190 for that same comic book raw. Spider-Man 1 from 1990, anything below a 9.6, it's probably going to be around $50 for like a 9.6 if you got it graded, but you could also probably get around $50 for raw. And of course, 9.4s, 9.2s, 9.0s, all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's not probably worth it to send it off to get it graded. Now, if you already bought it like that, that's a completely different story. Amazing Spider-Man 194, first appearance of Black Cat. I would say anything sub 8.5 is probably fine. You don't have to get it graded because it's going to run you about $2 to $250 depending on the grade below that. And I mean, you could probably get around $300, $315 for these books raw. Amazing Spider-Man 238, first appearance of the Hobgoblin. I'd say anything sub 9.2, it's probably going to run you around $200 to $300, depending how far you go sub 9.2. And you could probably get $250, $300 for the same equivalent grade. It might be slightly less, might be slightly more, depending on who wants it and the auction that it's in. You can also do Man of Steel 18, first appearance of Doomsday. Anything sub 9.6, like 9.6 and below, no problem. 9.6 and all the way down, they're all about the same price, graded, $40 to $45, and you could easily get that as a raw book as well. So you get to a certain point where the comic books are all kind of worth the same or slightly less, but it's not really worth it enough to send your book off to get it graded unless you really wanted to. But if you're trying to figure out what's the best way to get your value out, sometimes you can sell it raw and get the same price. Now, there will be more upside to selling a graded comic book. The variance in price for a graded book will be like this small, like in the same grade. It might be, an 8.0 would go from like $200 to $250. But a raw comic book, sure, you could get that $250 for that same book, but you could probably also get $150 or $125. The floor is much lower for a raw comic book. The ceiling is about the same as a graded book though, but the floor is much lower. So a graded book will be like here between high price, low price, and then a raw book will be about, it could be the ceiling up as high, but then the floor could be way down here. So that runs the risk of also having raw comic books. But again, if you have these super keys that are very popular and a lot of people are looking to get them, that helps boost the floor a little bit and people are willing to pay, more money for them, which then factors in, do I really need to get it graded? So you don't really have to if you don't want to. These are some books. I'm just showing you the difference of raw and graded values, and they seem to be about the same. Have a good day.